Good day, everyone. So today we've got Radostina and myself to present to you the 7 common chart shapes in astrology. And how are you, Radostina?
Hi, Donny. I'm very excited about this recording, and I'm happy that I meet you again virtually.
It's been a while since we
course.
talked.
Yeah, I know. I missed you.
I think the last video that we did regarding Venus, there's people are like always talking about when are we going to collaborate again.
Yeah, I know. People
Yeah, because people love our dynamics together. So I think we're just giving what the people want, I suppose.
Okay, so today we are talking about the patterns, planetary patterns.
Yes, and there's 7 common ones that we have.
According to Jones.
According to Edmund E. Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And so let me just start my presentation. And okay, so today we are talking about the 7 common chart shapes. And why are we talking about this? For me personally, I actually, in my readings, I talk about the chart shape of a person when I start off reading with a client, because this will set the tone in helping to identify what are the inclinations or what actually impels the individual or client to be the way that he or she is, how he or she actually uses his energy, where are the important ways in which energy is directed.
Mm-hmm.
And it can also help to uncover overall life attitudes.
Yeah, and it's especially interesting when we can see the chart shape clearly, because sometimes there might be variations. Sometimes the planets might be nearly in a chart shape, but when it's very well outlined, it's stronger.
Yes, and right here we've got 7 chart shapes in which we'll cover today. I'll cover 3 and Radostina will cover 3, and we both will come together and cover the 7th chart shape, which is splash over here, which is the hardest one to actually define because everything is so spread out.
Yeah, I have chosen an example for the splash to show that it's not easier just to say, okay, the planet's all over the place and you can say this is a splash.
Oh, yeah. I just want to tell the audience that no chart shape is better than another. And it's just how we use it. Each one has its own pluses and own minuses. And it's just how you bring into consciousness those things that's within you that it will help you to navigate your way to your path to self-identity. Basically, we are all using astrology, I find that is really trying to tell us how do we make milk the most lemonade out of lemons for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is always true when we're talking about positions in the chart in general, that nothing is good or bad, negative or positive. It's just how we use it and how conscious we are.
Yeah, true. So let's just start off with the first chart shape. And I'll start off with the bowl shape first. And on the top left-hand corner will be the ideal bowl shape, in which all the planets are actually occupying about half of the chart, around 180 degrees. And within those 180 degrees, it'll be preferable, although I've seen deviations from that between planets within the 180 degree range, ideally there's no more than 60 degree gaps in between any planets, because otherwise it will function as like a hole in a bowl, like something is leaking, and the the energy of the bowl will not be as powerful as it is. I know of a lot of people in my life that has this particular chart shape. So what I actually typed in here in this slide, some are actually from my observations. So when we talk about a bowl chart shape, the key words and phrases for people who have this chart pattern is that they are highly focused. And the main thing about a bowl-shaped chart is that there is an innate need or search for self-containment. They are also naturally very much of a resourceful kind of people. And when I see someone with a bowl chart shape, right, it reminds me of that axis of Taurus and Scorpio, because they are the axis naturally associated with resource, employment, and gathering. But it's a fixed sign axis, and so there's like a stubbornness that comes along with that as well. If someone has a bowl chart shape, since all the planets are located within 180 degrees of a chart, this means that the other half is empty. And what happens is that the person with a bowl chart shape will find that the other half of my life is missing. And he or she will actually reach out, be it via attracting a person or circumstance or a situation, in order to connect with what's missing out there.
That's interesting. Is there anybody popular that we know with such shape?
I have one, which is actually a Kennedy. Caroline Kennedy, to be exact. When I actually look at her natal chart, it still falls into a bowl chart shape, although it's slightly more than 180 degrees if we consider the boundary planets. Hers would be Uranus and the moon.
And maybe it's important to mention here that we are talking about shapes, but we include only planets, correct? We don't include the nodes, we don't include Chiron or anything else.
For me, I include Sun to Pluto without nodes and Chiron. How about yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in this case, for certain chart shapes, there's a term that's called the leading planet, and there's a thing that's called the trailing planet. So the leading planet is over here in this particular example, starts with Uranus as the leading planet. And how do I actually identify that? I actually count clockwise against the zodiac wheel until I hit the first part of the chart pattern. In her case, it'll be Uranus. And the very last planet over here will be the moon, which is the trailing planet in Aquarius. So when we actually talk about a bowl-shaped chart personality, they usually take life very seriously, and there's almost like a mission-based way of conducting their life, which is very evident in her case for Caroline Kennedy. And if we actually look at her leading planet, which is Uranus, in the 8th house, Uranus is what? Dramatic surprises and crises in her life. Uranus in the 8th. 8th house is also about potential kind of things that's outside of her control. And in her life, she has experienced the assassination of her father and her uncle. And she is the one that keeps all this or contain all this energy within herself to pull her inner resources up to deal with those things. And the trailing planet is the moon. in the sign of Aquarius. So if we actually look at it's almost like the first planet is Uranus, then it goes by zodiacal sign order. That's how they process the whole experience in their life. And so the very last planet here is really about emotional detachment, very much Moon in Aquarius energy. That's how she can prevent her own life from falling apart. Not the easiest chart, I must say, but then this is very much indicative of how she contains her own life and build her own inner resources by being emotionally attached. There are certain aspect patterns that's very much indicative or found commonly within the bow chart shape. A T square is very common, in which there's an opposition, and ideally there'll be a planet that squares both planets that define the brim of the bowl. And for her, it's actually Mars. And Mars in the sign of Scorpio is very intuitive. So the way that she will use her bowl shape is also to develop and use her intuition and instincts in terms of emotionally driven lessons or actions. But it can also be that it can create somewhat of a drama queen. You know, but someone who's very much came here onto Earth to develop her intuition, and her actions will actually reflect that. Yeah. And she's one of the first to actually quit the administration when Trump was, when the news of Trump actually came in. This can be very much that Uranus, Moon, and Mars energy is like, okay, he's in, I'm out, just very quickly like that. So for the next chart shape, we'll talk about a more concentrated energy, which is called the bundle or cluster. And this is defined by all the planets being squished within 1/3, that means within 120 degrees of the zodiac wheel, or 5 consecutive houses within the chart. And I've also put here that this is actually what I find the rarest of all these 7 common chart shapes that we're going to discuss. Because for a bundle and cluster to happen, stelliums need to be part of the equation. So you will find that people who have bundle or cluster chart shape, naturally there's going to be easily 1 or 2 or even 3 stelliums over here, as indicated by this diagram. When someone has a bundle or cluster chart shape, this shows a specialist kind of energy, and they have very defined, and there's almost like a very tunnel vision focus into what they are set out to do in their lives. A lot of concentration within them, a lot of persistence and commitment as well. And they are very much the expert within a field that they choose to master in. There's a chance to really master a field of work as defined by the planets or the houses that's occupied in their chart. But being so single-minded and being so determined can also make them miss out on other parts of their life. So because there'll be a lot of houses which are empty in their chart, even more than the bowl. So there can be kind of like an obsessive and addictive personality that may come with that because of the presence of stelliums being common for a bundle or cluster chart shape or pattern. And the narrow scope of focus can mean that they can potentially be stuck in a way of thinking as well.
I was going to say at some point that while we were talking about being the person who has a bundle or a cluster is a specialist, and I was going to say that it's maybe a good time to promote myself because I have a cluster in my chart. But then you said single-minded, and I was like, oh no.
No.
I'm joking.
The quality of being like a specialist, it is a plus, but it's also, it can bring its potential like issues as well, because you have a very specific personal point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And that really defines, okay, like depending what signs are occupied in your particular bundle or cluster, you'll be so heavily focused in those areas whereby the rest of it just seem alien to you. And there may be a very specific way in how you relate to people as well, which can be plus or minus because you have your own specific audience, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's very, this is really important to highlight that it's very interesting to look at different bundle charts and see how people act according to the houses that they occupy, because mine are all in the public sector, if I may say. It's all on top of my chart, and somebody else who has their planets on the bottom or like under the horizon, they would be totally the opposite person to me, probably. And again, there would be something that is very similar between us because of this focus and because of this determination and because of this stubbornness.
Well, I mean, if everything is above the horizon, it'll be more of like an objective or extroverted way of life, that you're always in the public eye and you'll be taking into consideration the public opinion that's coming to you. When everything is inverted, everything's underneath the horizon, that means underneath the ascendant-descendant line. It's more about introverted perspective and also a very much subjective one.
I was going to say, I think that when we have a bundle or cluster, whatever you want to call it, it's I think it's always subjective in some way, even though mine is like on top. I think that there's a lot of subjectivity because of this concentration.
That's what I put down here, highly subjective with strong personal point of view. And so there's a very defined way, like when people love you, they will love you like because they see your concentrated energy in that part of your chart. May I know what are the signs that's your bundle? Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn. Is it these three signs?
Yeah, Scorpio.
Yeah, so people who actually identify with those three signs will actually naturally be so glued to you because you embody so much of those energies within yourself. Yeah. And I've also put that in terms of relating, it may be a bit harder for someone with a bundle shape.
Yeah, because they're so into their ways.
It depends. Although I must
of course, it depends.
If the bundle, as in your case, is everything is above the ascendant-descendant line, you'll still be sensitive to public opinion. But if someone who has a bundle who is like below the ascendant-descendant line, then it can really make someone very much of an introvert. Yeah.
But still, they would when they let somebody in, they would be very, I think, very caring and very like.
Oh yes, that doesn't mean that like someone with a bundle chart will be doomed for relationships. It's just that it's a very specific way in which they know, not far from connecting with someone, that do they like this person or not. It's very easy to kind of classify where you stand with a bundle shaped person. It doesn't take that long, you know what I mean? And But when someone has the bowl-shaped chart pattern that's underneath the horizon, there'll be increased tendency to have a somewhat lack of confidence in most situations. And he or she may only stay concerned with private affairs. What's happening in the world, they may just kind of like, you know what, I'm just going to hide in my house and that's about it. I know. And all that. And I've also put down here, what are the celebrities with this bundle or cluster chart shape, like yourself, which are Scarlett Johansson, Sylvester Stallone, Paul McCartney, and George W. Bush. And for the example, I've actually pulled up Paul McCartney's chart and see where and kind of tell the audience whether does his chart fit the bundle or cluster chart shape. For his chart, is a bit of a deviation because from the first planet to the last planet, the boundary planets that is, they are actually 128 degrees apart to be exact. And we've actually defined earlier that it needs to be around 120 degrees as one of the condition, but I still consider his chart as a bundle and cluster. And the boundary planets right here are the two musical planets, which are Venus and Neptune. Neptune being conjunct his ascendant. One thing I picked up regarding his chart is that I can see from his chart, he's a very emotional person because of that Jupiter and Neptune square. If I were to allow a wider op, Neptune is also squaring his sun. On one hand, he can be very intuitive and imaginative. I think that's very much important to be writing music as a musician. But then when something is squaring Neptune, there can be an overreaction to things. And it can be overwhelming psychically for the person. So there's that. And the last chart shape that I'm going to present for my part is the splay or tripod chart shape, in which this one is more unique because there are certain areas of specialization. When you see the diagram over here, this will somehow define a very close to perfect splay or tripod chart shape, in which there'll be at least two, but usually three pairs of conjunction. I call them clumps of planets that are distributed randomly, but in no more than 4 of the zodiac houses, preferably, but it can deviate. And usually when we talk about a splay chart, there's well, ideally between each cluster, because there's usually 3 clusters, ideally they are 60 degrees apart between them or more. And there are certain aspect patterns that comes with a splay or tripod chart shape. And the most obvious one will be a grand trine, because there'll be three groups of planets that's roughly that's spaced apart. But having said that, I've also seen T-squares in which there's an opposition and 2 squares forming within a splay or tripod chart shape as well. And if among the 3 groups, one of the groups that's only like a single planet there, this can actually tell me what's the real talent of that person. Because that single planet that forms those chart shapes will lead the other planet, so to speak. And I've actually put here that the splay is the most common, but yet is the least clearly defined chart shape because of this uneven distribution of planets around the whole chart. And if I were to talk about the keywords and phrases for this chart shape, it really shows someone who is potentially multifaceted and talented because of the clusters or clumps of planets that's all around the chart. But there's also like I call that the Uranian energy or Aquarian energy for someone that has a splay or tripod shape, because they are naturally very individualistic and they are also non-conformist by nature. And with that, there's a scorpionic part that comes along with that, because I've also seen that splay and tripod chart shapes usually contain, it may also contain stelliums. So there's an intensity and obsessive energy that may be present in their character. And I think the main phrase that comes to mind is focused diversity. They are focused. They are focused because they are clumps of planets, but then they are also diverse at the same time because it's spread apart. And so, the two words are actually kind of contradictory in a way.
Yeah.
That the person may or may not see the interconnectedness between all three things or more. They learn a whole bunch of stuff, but they just don't know how to connect the pieces together.
And would you say that these people usually have more than one profession?
It can be, or that they are so interested in picking up so many interests and passions that they are just lost in the end.
Oh yeah, that would be the lower vibration of this expression.
I have also seen someone with this chart shape who's a very, very good entrepreneur as well, because it goes back to the individualistic and non-conformist nature. And I've also put here the disdain for routine and regiment that's very prevalent in a splay or tripod chart shape, that they prefer to be their own boss. But however, in order to materialize that, they can't seem to put the pieces together, like the different skill set that they focus their passions on. But then when they do, they are so powerful as well. And so it's really for them to kind of get their act together and make the most out of their true potential, and try to connect along the way, whether it's there a tangible end equation or end result that they're aiming for, and not just kind of like disperse, you know what I mean? Everything out and have all these passions. It's a very Gemini energy as well, now that I think about it. That they develop all these skills and in the end, they're just lost. Yeah. And the one chart that I picked out as an example in this case will be CC Zane, or Albert Benjamin. He's actually the author of the Church of Light lessons in astrology, tarot, and other esoteric subjects as well. And he actually his work provided a foundation for astrological education in the US for several decades. So if we widen the requirements for a trine aspect, he actually has a grand trine going on for him, which is moon. If we allow 10 degree to be considered as a trine, he has a moon and Uranus trine, and both are trining towards Neptune and also Saturn. So he has a grand trine going on, but that's if we widen our orbs.
I think we can widen the orbs because it is the moon. So with the sun and the moon, we can always use the biggest orbs possible. Yeah. Some people even use 12 degrees for any aspects with the sun and the moon. So I think it's fine.
So we have a very wide grand trine with the moon included, but then we also have a T square with opposition of Jupiter and Mercury, Mars, and the Sun, actually, all squaring Uranus, so that Uranus on the midheaven is so prominent. And Uranus, one of the thing is astrology. And I also provide vocational readings on Astrology as well. And one of the planets I really look at for someone who's suited to do like a helping or a healing work is actually Uranus. Because what is within Uranus that suits a healing and a healing and social, what do you call that? A healing and helping profession. Because if you think about Uranus, it's about progressing humanity forward. And so this is what I reckon if someone is planning to go into that field, I usually look at how strong their Uranus is in their chart.
And here we have Uranus in Virgo, correct?
Yes.
So it's even more prominent to say that.
And it's very close to conjunct the midheaven, which is what he's known for.
Yeah. And also the nice aspect from Neptune, who also helps with the energy of healing and
all the esoteric good stuff.
Yeah.
All the esoteric good stuff. And really tapping into the invisible realm to like supercharge our consciousness and lead humanity forward. To have more compassion, Neptune as well. And Uranus and Neptune are also both occult-related planets. Yeah, because they deal naturally with, there's a 12th house energy naturally connected to Neptune. But then Uranus really is about connecting with the sky gods as well.
As I like to call them, the out of this world planets.
Sure. And so you can see how it plays out in this person's life, and he is very instrumental in bringing forth like esoteric subjects, astrology and tarot, just to name a few. So with this, I shall pass it over to Radostina.
Thank you. This was a really interesting information that you provided us with, and I will share my share of the aspects. I hope everybody can see. I'm not quite sure. But there we go. We are going to talk about the bucket, the seesaw, and the locomotive.
I'm excited now. One of these three is my chart shape. So yeah.
Yeah, we have somehow distributed the shape so that you can talk about my type of chart, and I'll be talking about your part of chart. And then we're going to also see that it's sometimes very hard to distinguish one type from another, especially when talking about the ball and the locomotive, for example. Even though this is very easy to see and to distinguish because the ball would be stopping here, these wouldn't be included. They would be on this side because we have this opposition here. But in reality, our charts are so different, and so like the planets are not always perfectly aligned, of course. For the certain pattern, of course, they're perfectly aligned for our lives. So we're going to look at some variations and some things that may be hard to distinguish, but still these are part of the 7 patterns that we are going to be covering today. These are the ones that I'm going to cover, and then we have the splash at the end that we're going to talk about
chime in together. Yeah.
So the first one is the bucket, and the bucket is, as we can see, all of the planets are in one half of the chart, and there's only one, or the so-called singleton, or the handle of the bucket, that is on the other half of the chart, and it's basically the apex or the focused planet, or the planet that is holding everything together for a person with a bucket chart. Usually we have the handle is always the one that we are talking about. It's always the one that is playing the main part of the person's life, and sometimes it can be quite hard to live with such chart, because this can be a challenging thing to live by, because it feels, as I said, it's called the singleton, so it means that it's
Almost
the
like
only,
everything is like zoom in on that
yeah,
singleton
it's
bus
like
handle.
everybody's relying on this planet. The rest
To
of the
drive
planets
the
are
rest.
like, you have to be our like main character, you have to be our leader. And this can also indicate some sort of a complex, some sort of insecurity, especially before the person's 30th, like before the Saturn return. It can be quite a struggle to express this, or to have it balanced, or to live it in the best way possible. But then again, if the person with such chart can grow and can understand himself or herself, and work towards balancing out the energies, he can also become a specialist in the area that this handle is occupying in the chart.
Right.
It's the dominant planet, so it's really important to take a look at which house it is in, which sign it is in. And I also use the ruler of this planet to check the situation there, because it gives us extra information about how we can handle this handle.
I always think of the bucket as a bowl with a handle. Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
really. So maybe saying that, we can also take a look at the two planets that are forming the ball part of the chart, and see what might be the another struggle, like the last planet before the handle is also something that can be bringing some challenges in our life. And maybe we can use this first planet. Again, we are looking at the planets clockwise. So we can use the first planet to help us with integrating the handle and making the best of it. Yeah, and I have Will Smith here. Of course, this is the ideal bucket, and I have taken out his chart from AstroSeek and from astro.com. For some reason in AstroSeek they have
Leo
made
rising.
the wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, they made the wrong time. I mean, they put the wrong time in his chart, but it's very nice how they indicate the shape. So he has Saturn in the 12th house with the correct time in Astro.com. And we can also see that part of this chart is very often the yod, or the, what is it called?
Oh, yeah, the yod, yeah.
Sorry.
A sextile with two inconjuncts. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's called the finger of God or something like that.
Finger
as well.
of God.
So it's, as we mentioned before, it just points right to the apex, right to the top of the bucket. And in the 12th house, of course, 12th house has to do with music, has to do with movie making. So it's a very like, it's no surprise that his handle is in the sphere of these topics that he is known for. And his chart is quite like
Squished together.
bundled, bundled and squished.
Squished together.
So that's why I used it, because you see that originally we can have a bigger spread, like we can have the planets wider spread, but this is also called a bundle. Sorry, not a bundle, but bucket.
A bucket. I think there's a variation of the bucket that's called a fan. You know, a fan.
Yeah.
So it's even more narrow. I think that's what he has. But just know that there's just a single planet, just away from the rest. That Mars is ruled by Mercury, which is in Libra. So that's why he's doing what he does, like sing, he raps, he's in movies. You know what I mean? Is the artist and all that.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely has a very artistic nature, especially with the moon conjunct Neptune and
film star.
all these planets in the fifth house.
Entertainment.
Sure.
Entertainment industry.
Entertainment and
interesting. Maybe for him, it's really like develop a stronger sense of spirituality as he grows older. That might be fulfilling his handle planet, which is Saturn in the 12th house.
I don't know. Is he directing movies? Because I'm thinking about for him being a director, or even having his producing company.
I think he does. He did produce a few films as well. Yeah, because planets in the 12th house can also be actively used in vocation as well.
Yeah, and also Saturn is one of the indications for where we have to become masters of wherever it is. And it can also indicate that when he was younger, he might not have been so confident, especially because and so driven because of Saturn being in the first sign, being in Aries, which is
in fall,
which has to do with with being proud of who you are, not worrying about what you're doing and acting on your impulses. So he maybe hasn't been so outspoken, so confident, and growing up he went through all of these insecurities.
And as he gets older, the leadership comes along with that, with lessons. Along the way. Yeah. Cool.
Then we have the Seesaw. Of course, it's a very Libra-like pattern, as we can imagine, because it's going from one side to the other. We have planets clustered in one side of the chart, and then in opposition. There has to be at least one opposition for this type of chart. And usually it's easy to see because they're just opposing planets from both sides of a chart. And it's usually a rare pattern, we don't see it very often. And there have to be at least 60 degrees gap between the two clusters. But I would say maybe 90 is ideal. Because with 60 we go to another type of chart, and we can get confused with, for example, the Splay, or we can get confused with the Splash. So the more the better when there is a gap.
How many defined Seesaw charts have you read before in your astrological career? I think so far I've read only less than 3, if I recall.
I haven't really counted them, to be honest. But as I said, it's a rare pattern. it's not easy to find the same as the bundle, even though I think I've seen a lot of bundles, to be honest.
Very
Now that I
interesting
think about
relationship
it.
stories. Should ask a Seesaw chart shape person.
With the Seesaw, there is this insecurity, or there is always balance. This person can be either very like unstable, or always finding the middle ground with anybody who he is in a conflict, or with himself, or just being a great communicator and great medium person.
So
in
a very
some
good
way.
mediator, but then also they may flip flop a lot.
Yeah.
Indecisive all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's it depends on what they've done, but even though with their lives, I mean, even though one doesn't exclude the other. I mean, they can be really good at, for example, if they're lawyers, they can be great lawyers, or they can be great counselors in some way, or even wedding agents. All the Libra professions, I think, are good for the Seesaw people.
Right.
But they can be great business people. But in certain areas of their life, they might be very insecure. They might be flip-flopping, as you said.
There's a
And
lot
not
of inner tension as well, because they're trying to balance two polar opposites.
yeah, and sometimes they just feel like they're distracted from concentrating on finding the balance, instead of actually doing things and living their life freely.
Right.
So it can be a challenging aspect to live with. And because of these oppositions, sometimes they might just decide that they had enough of trying to balance everything out. So they find a partner who can help them and work from one side of their chart. Like if they decide to work with this side of the chart, they attract people who are the polar opposites, so they can balance out the planets that they can't.
In other words, they just hang
with.
on to one side and let the other one carry the other side.
Yeah, sometimes that can happen too.
Right.
Somebody who has a Seesaw is
Okay.
Whitney Houston. Well, it's again very helpful to see the planets this way, so we can actually see the Seesaw. But the chart that you would usually see, it looks like this with all the aspects, and this is why again we say that it's not easy to determine the patterns. And of course, she's a very good example of the Aries Libra.
Yeah.
So pattern, because the planets that are part of the pattern are mostly on the side of the seventh house, and there are a couple that are in the first house, even though we are using Placidus here. So it's a hard thing to balance out, because of Saturn being in the 12th house. But again, Saturn in the 12th house, and she is in the music and entertainment business with her beautiful sun in Leo. And there is some, of course, the tragedy that happened to her and how she died is, I think it shows the way that when you cannot find the balance and you get really, really tired, and you end up
Self-destruct, that's the thing.
Yeah, self-destructing.
What I find really interesting is that for Whitney's chart, like on one side you have the Saturn, which has an opposition to Sun and Venus, And then you got the other tip of the bundle, in Aries, which is Moon and Jupiter opposing Mars. And so that kind of defines like the seesaw shape. And the only thing that sticks out to me like a sore thumb is Neptune.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that Neptune really is the even though I wouldn't say that he is the main player in his life, but again, her career is Neptunian.
Yes.
The way she died is Neptunian. The reason she died is Neptunian. So it's I don't know whether you know she.
And then Neptune is the tip of the T square with like Saturn and Sun and Venus. So it is very interesting that all those Neptunian things, because when I see a seesaw shape and there's like a planet dangling outside of a seesaw, that planet becomes very important and high focused.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure here because of the aspects from Saturn, and he is himself in a Neptunian house, where he actually, according to
planetary joy,
yeah, he's fine there in the 12th house, but still in a square to Neptune and opposing Venus and Sun. It's not an easy way to live.
Well, Saturn and Neptune are not good friends, right? By relation, planetary relationships. So it is rough. But anyways, like you can see how like a planet that's lying outside the main shape can have so much significance and symbolic. Like it just kind of keep manifesting in her life all the things that she's known for. Yeah.
And Neptune is also the only planet that's in a water sign in her chart.
Oh yes.
So again, it makes it a singleton. So it makes it
in many ways,
it difficult.
It's like a sore thumb.
Oh well. There we go.
All right.
Locomotive, your type of chart.
Oh, that's my chart shape, yeah.
That's your chart shape, yeah. Locomotive is it's similar to the ball again, but we have
one more sticking
bigger spread. Sorry?
It's the ball plus one more.
Yeah. We have all the planets in the in 240 degrees spread, and usually there are four empty signs. So this is how we can recognize this locomotive chart. And again, this is the leading planet or the locomotive, and this is the train, and that's the last coach. And again, this is the planet that's suffering, and or the person is suffering with the planet at the end. And this is the one who is dragging all the rest of the planets, and the whole energy is concentrated there and has the strongest impact. So it's great if a person who has a locomotive chart has the first planet well situated, like in a sign that it rules or in a sign of exaltation. That would be the best. So it has a strong energy. It has strong energy to manage all the rest. This is a chart of a person who is very driven, and it shows that they have a mission in life. They know how to they know what they want, and they know how to get there, and there's nothing stopping them from chasing their dreams, basically. So another thing that is helpful for such person, and it's like a key to their success, is the midpoint of these 100 and it's the midpoint of the 240 degrees, which comes in opposition, and
it's like the hinge of the pattern, right? The door hinge is like
Yeah.
You have the tip of the train, which is the leading planet. And then if there's a planet opposing that midpoint of the empty trine, it really has the push.
Yeah, or of course there wouldn't be a planet there, but the point that's opposing is super important, and it works like a handle maybe. If we take it from the bucket pattern, but in a more, I think, in a more positive way, because we have a very driven person, as I said here, and they would, if there's anything else in the chart that can help them, they will use it at their best. They wouldn't struggle, I would say. And again, they have to work on the last planet, because this can be something that they maybe they neglect in some way, because just subconsciously they feel like this is the last thing that they have to worry about, or they never find time to work with it. And sometimes it can be difficult aspect that requires flexibility, and because of their ideas and energy that's focused on chasing their dreams and aims, they might forget about this, or don't want to be bothered with being flexible about one thing when they have another 8. And an example is Isaac Newton, who is a scientist. Of course, he is a person of many faces, I would say, but he's always been into different inventions and making the world better. And again, because here, for example, Uranus is, and I would say this is his first planet, and Uranus is basically the locomotive, the planet that drives his inventions and makes him work on getting the humanity to better times. And that's why he has made the humanity progress. And of course, having Uranus as a driving planet makes the emotions the last thing that we can worry about, even though his moon is very well situated in Cancer, and he always does things to care about the population, let's say. If we take a look at the moon
benefit the public.
If we take a look at the moon as the public. So that's another example of a Uranian person who has brought enlightenment to the humanity
through his inventions and theories, right? Which is very Uranian theories and theoretical.
And he was also into esoteric topics and spirituality as well. And the last shape is the splash. As we see, it's basically planets everywhere. We have in the ideal part of having a splash, it means that we have a planet in almost every sign, because we have 10 planets, 12 signs, so maybe 2 signs are empty and the rest are occupied by a different planet. But it doesn't always work like that, and it's not that easy. Even though I have seen, even from my students, there are a lot of people who have the splash pattern, and it's actually not a unique one. We can often find a splash. And the distribution is even, but as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, I have chosen one that at first I wouldn't say it's a splash, maybe more of a splay. And I'm just going to show you in a moment. Just wanted to mention as well that these people are very intelligent and they're very curious, but they can also be very scattered. They might find it hard to concentrate on one thing, and they might find it hard to be masters of one thing, and that's why I have put here in my like thumbnails that it's like, sorry, bullet points, not thumbnails. That they can be something like jack of all trades and master of none.
Master of none.
And the hardest thing for them also can be to find their center and to understand themselves and to be composed and just concentrate on the important things. But other than that, they're very independent, and they're very friendly, and they're people who know a lot and can communicate pretty well with almost anybody on any topic. So it's very Gemini-like, I think, the energy of people.
I would think like Aquarius, because it's almost like when someone has a splash chart shape, it's like usually there's only one planet in one sign or one house.
Yeah, that's
and it's like
that's true.
So the open-mindedness I think comes from there as well. Hence they are so adaptable in terms of like, oh, I know this, oh, I also know this, just like a little bit to start that conversation, like a HR manager.
yeah. True. Absolutely. And here we have Jung, who was given as an example, and I just find it interesting that his chart is I wouldn't personally call it a splash, but still in a lot of the data that I have been going through, they give it as an example of splash, and that's why I chose it, so I can show that there are different types of splash. It somehow reminds me of Whitney Houston's Seesaw, and this planet on the side. Yeah.
Sticking out.
But on the other hand, it's quite far from the rest of the planet, so we wouldn't say it's a seesaw, really.
Yeah. So in other words, what Radostina is trying to say is that when you see a chart, the first impression can link you to one chart shape, but then you need to look at what actually defines that chart shape to kind of come to the conclusion. It may be a hybrid chart shape for all, It can also happen that way as well. It can be two chart shapes.
Yeah. There might be in one horoscope there might be a few chart shapes actually. Yes, there can be one of these 7, and then there are some additional ones like the kite, like the fan that you have mentioned, all sorts. I mean, there's so many shapes that we can. There's the mystic rectangle, the envelope, and all sorts of things. But maybe it's also good to know that you shouldn't worry about not knowing the shapes, because the information that you get from the shapes is information that you can find without knowing much about shapes. So everything in astrology can be found from many aspects and from in many ways. And what I wanted to mention about Jung is that, as I said, the splash can be a scattered person that cannot find the center of himself, and it's very interesting that he has such shape because he's actually trying to find the center of the person, and also understanding how complex the personality is and how it can go into many different directions. And he was also a big fan of astrology, and he was using astrology in his works.
I think one main thing that I can think of is because that even though all the planets are somewhat scattered, but then they are linked via aspect patterns.
Yeah.
Like on the top left, we've got like minor grand trine, which is a trine with two sextiles. And then you got a T square somewhere.
Yeah, and then between Uranus, Saturn, and the Moon.
You even have a yod going on.
True.
Like, all those things just play into it. And I think if I widen the orb a little bit, he actually has this aspect pattern called a cradle.
Oh, yeah.
A cradle. If I widen the orb between Uranus and Jupiter, it actually forms like a cradle. Yeah. Like, so it fits the baby in, and all that. So a splash just means that someone who's very so diverse in interest. And I think it's because of those aspect patterns that he somehow find a way to kind of merge everything into his Jungian therapy, was it? Is what it's called? And all the schools that he's helped to set up and all that.
It's amazing. I mean, it's super interesting to look at different charts and patterns, and then to find how all is connected and how one leads to the other. And then there are so many points that we can take a look at, and they can confirm what we have already said about the pattern.
Yeah, and I think the last few things I wrote for a splash chart shape is someone who's very dexterous, highly adaptable, well-rounded because of how wide of a spread the planets are. Someone who wants to do it all.
And they usually, if they give themselves enough time, they can actually do it all. They can actually do it all.
And also, last two words is very worldly because they can just connect to a whole broad audience.
Yeah.
And last but not least, charismatic.
Charismatic, absolutely. Yeah.
Charismatic.
They are very charismatic, but at the same time, they are very self-sufficient. Very self-sufficient. Because they're so interested in so many. Yeah, and they're so interested in so many times and in so many things that they cannot get bored.
So even though the splash, we initially define it as someone who can be scattered, scattered and lack of focus or all that, but when it's somewhat knit into like a whole bunch of aspect patterns, it can actually bring some tangible manifestation, like what he did with his life and his contributions to the world.
Yep. Well, that was very interesting.
Yeah.
I hope that our viewers think the same.
Well, also, you may apply the chart shapes we discussed in your solar return chart also.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this not only applies to natal. I just want to let the audience know that, like, when you see a very distinct solar return chart that has a certain shape, you can apply like things that we discussed in this video, and you can see where, for the solar year, where your energy will be focusing and how you can utilize it to the best of your ability.
Oh, so if you have a chart shape with a with an apex planet. You can take a look at the solar return, or even in progressions if it's one of the ones that are moving faster. And see what's happening there and if it will be active. Also, it's very interesting to look at the years when this focused planet was the ruler of your perfection year. So we can use these in many ways.
Yeah, and chart shapes usually are usually the macro picture of what it can bring. But then they've got so many, like when you it's almost like chart shape is the it's really the super broad based view of the year. And then you zoom it into the little things. And then they will kind of paint for you, like kind of add the fillings to your burger. The chart shape is like the bun. Yeah, the chart shape is just the bun. Yeah, the chart shape is the bun only. So you gotta fill in like the good stuff with like looking more in depth into stuff to bring it flavor. Yeah.
Well, it was pleasure meeting you and
it's been a while.
Yeah. we should get together again soon.
Yeah, we should. So okay, I think that's all we have to present for chart shapes, and let us know in the comments if there's any topics that you would like us to cover next. Ciao.
Bye.